Cameras are live.
That's really scary. What? Okay,
yeah, it's there.
Here's the one you see.
Yeah.
Let me know when you both have it up. Okay. Alright, oh, wait, here's the one AC and NDCA one.
Got it.
Okay, is everyone ready? Advantage from its multilateralism, anti-Americanism, unilateral multi-policy doesn't use legitimacy, threatening American international system of corruption, 12 active downtrade specific conflicts with left Americans, ready for focus on the whole front, digital power change, China's rise and active dynamics of the life version over China to catch up with the US, the dollar euro, China should become co-equal to much power, how that shows effective influence with the US, but supposed to US will have to make sense carefully adjusting requires making more room for newcomers to managing the diversity of the company, the realignment, the release of the growth, the managed rising powers, being the different consumption, the order, smarter dual would give rising powers a wider berth of what needs to be leadership that focus on getting a diverse and political cooperation. Rising powers are challenging the international system legitimacy is critical to safe integration. Fujimoto 12. Peer competitors with the greatest long-term center national security with incredible threats of the situation, adaptation of investability, legitimacy, the institutional production, engines of war, culture, war, no longer the dominant power, peer competitors, historical zone, regional, split threats, global influence, was built capacity in the existing institutional alliances, the multiple national power, any other legitimate support, local war, culture, course, multilateral doctrine, which was a precepts of previous mission, geological in alienation of allies, will guard direct military unilateral, otherwise the consensus of hegemonic stability theorists agree that uncivil power solution causes Asia war, which will global Kugler 6. Power situation research for the claim the conflict China, India, and the US non-political power for political negotiation among conditions from other challenges can be made satisfied with the North governing war policy suicide made a chase of war is expected such war has to be a hyper-public developing nuclear weapons, altering calculation because the research expected cost war so high that war becomes unthinkable. Power theory supported by decades of demographic and economic research that the nuclear powers will perceive the peace if Western because the Chinese Indian leaders join with Sasko peace and prosperity should endure the chance for conflict because of essentially this is true even in the face of enormous cost that will be faced with nuclear war. Now the plan solves first, it creates a credible model for multilateral conflict resolution, triggers and 10. Resuming relations would be a real step for multilateral 184 nation work against the embargo powers that will use unilateral with Cuba with the focus on multilateral work to break this independence if a new beginning in negotiation break down international work be easy to develop from all not to see as a bargaining tool sufficient to accumulate that any embassy government form will and be meaningful relations embargo can animate real progress by dealing with the use of policy and governance Cuban support the embargo help create the American enemy moving any public to rebellion on the cash struggle legitimate Cuban struggle and applying active forces on diplomatic support to fail to achieve the intended changes. Obama will be seen as a leader for multilateral systems and Cuba for the international momentum and credibility of all problems the Middle East and cash of love versus with and also getting socially with the public people this use to lead again reverse this kind of true peace, and that conflict model bolsters Obama's credibility and convinces other countries to negotiate with the U.S. General 11. Obama has the opportunity to highlight the benefits of high-power engagement as evidence of the usability to engage countries' legitimacy will grow. Iran or North Korea will be more make concessions knowing the U.S. will turn to by normalizing relations. Obama would indicate that he's truly willing to extend his hand once Obama's American constitution after state countries face them. Second, it sends a clear signal to create partnerships with Latin America and reinvigorate to the OES Flight 13. Our positive alternative to individual life into human representative prophecy to all Latin American states, powerful social activities, and administration boundaries like the OAS, the civil question has been community bilateral problem to multilateral challenge for present policy case. You will see the emergence of two rival camps, the U.S. versus Latin America, while Washington joins relations with individual countries' division of a hemisphere partners company will be reducing historical footnote, increased regional standing, bolsters influence in international institutions through the creation of voting blocks like the U.S. lead multilateral forum, Sabatini, and merger of the nature of allies with the tension of the heart of the U.S. change will pursuing global power regional allies with emerging conflicts of diametrical with Russia and Brazil. They would be a forecast that users implement some more general Americans becoming more international U.S. Latin American religions and the conceptual framework strategy has with the rest of the world and multilateral leads to greater power sharing and international cooperation solving conflict. But boiled 11. Multilateral international cooperation and powers for action will turn to the for recovery from increasing global events. They may not agree in action, but at least they can build an established political with problem conflicts will be negotiated with the cooperation power sharing, multilateral procedure, moderation, global process action, getting multilateral procedure with radical solutions. They multilateral procedure forces action, the right similar analytical lens of multilateral schedule, and shaping preferences, multilateral legitimacy process based on virtue. They also lead to more efficient implementation because action for the lesson and the solution multiplication self-reinforcing dynamics, new focal points for cheating interaction. Now, any step toward unconditional removal will create the same symbol of multilateralism from Vega 6. Whether we'll capture the name of the different role multilateral Washington and needs that the embargo nothing short of this will work out in the cash in which the U.S. will leave the embargo prosecuted for with the U.S. Cuban government how they concession from the embargo helps keep it power more measured and multilateral approaches needed. Now, legitimacy is critical to primacy principle back to more 9. Legitimacy practices like the social structure which private exercise without acceptance of legitimacy or creation of maintenance is difficult even under unilateral acceptance of or reverse from mandates extra power, but the uniform cheaper more effective than uniform possible for the degree to which policies are accepted by others which like significant to legitimacy culture corporate resistance internationally great legitimacy essential for a creative rival who cannot balance military activity they can franchise and the credibility and integrity of the uniform attempts and legitimized policies are stable for making maybe but even more often states have fewer material capabilities. Only the plan results in rallying cry for anti-Americanism. Paris 10. The U.S. trying to isolate Cuba and acts as the U.S. from the rest of the world. America's hostile relation has become rallying cry for Latin leaders of America. Simmons has shuffled that out with Cuba has used stepping stones to mostly normalize relations. Plan the next referendum to normalize the trade relations with Cuba. Contention to its transition. Cuba's current reforms are slow, contradictory, and insufficient. The plan is key structure and about 1015. I want to respond this with Cuban people through practice policy including the decades of failed sanctions. These reforms will not result in significant improvement, large reform of the political governance, social privacy, enterprise, efficiency of important conditions, contradiction forces are unwilling to relinquish the model they use to be helping the process try to stop itself movement. Is of church occupation are unskilled whereas the place provided are unskilled university graduate campaign has self-employed practice required the government has contradictions with the special relationship with the being followed political change welcomes rights when being normalization use Cuban relations. The Cuban reforms are inevitable. Structural deficiencies, just economic class offering normal trade relations is vital. Act 13. Cuba has entered improved economic transformations after top like the Cuban communists to make social trade healthy outcome will generate average consequences to security. The U.S. must to open the trade with consequences of the impact the U.S. operation will create change and in current laws normalize financial trade will benefit Cuba and help it provide economic stability independently of the embargo will help crash the legislation legislation. Now the embargo ruins Cuba's economy. 6 warns CTIM the harmful economics and the embargo obstacles to normalization service expectation losses of commercial legalization growth and service of cause opposition education and international financial implications social damage to the embargo and directly impedes Cuban economic growth. The embargo penalized extra sectors. It's on the brink now. Chavez's death in the election Maduro unresponsibility French 13 nation has said procedural lines using large Chavez the international Maduro will respond to any pressure domestically for a focus policy that drive people leaders to speed up reform. The current reform process is failing to ensure long-term economic stability. Become 13 reform is a short on the result in the economic inflation will grow the time will try to de-icing the economy to handcuff the U.S. from having any positive influence on authorizing financial system spreading trade adding and travel and the economic sector letting become cash moving the proportion U.S. credit current use must use Cuban interest but humanize the U.S. with time for new initiative engagement. More moderate approaches comparatively fail to stabilize Cuba. Coding 10. Strengthen the current policy use become the isolated discredit the embargo with cost and practice limited easy. Cuba when addressing the graduation maintain control movement potential for reforms in the current government. The option with the good policy says this with the embargo the whole legal which we see formal trade relations for all the addressing support the Cuban government without working as a regime to demoralize improvements the result of natural capital and we see the relaxation of tension the economy resulting to counteract this trend and revert back to the fight with the Americans use with the opportunity to assist the from secure economic spreaders and the government realize they don't have a scapegoat. Cuban instability causes terrorism and makes conflicts in the globe hospitals around the globe more likely. Grow 5. A power vacuum creates instability and civil war. Human people have to try anarchy, strong loss of 100,000 security. A refugee crisis by hearing continuing the U.S. maybe Ukrainian international crime problem opportunity for to operate increase in these groups export activity from Cuba. The U.S. and war continues to more complicated security when being threatened by fresh remarks. The U.S. may be forced to employ force security and others to use little to distract the dimension. Does not have the use of person crisis Christ, into the half of the house of Father, transaction with no care. Well, may Christ has much trying to go to May can be next the east required national party needs to allow the key position of layout hotspots in North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, risk escalation, global nuclear war, Moscow, say small acts about global complications, there were wars, Russian equipments, nuclear capabilities, and now just the start of both or world conflict, like North Korea, France, World News, Pakistan, is the second key office to NATO. There is more than a finished by conflict, the military is losing the key global split, and terrorist attacks, risk a massive global nuclear war, ice and 10 Nazi nuclear tests, interesting nuclear change are not separable to nuclear with precipitating massive change in global scenarios, the risk of war, nuclear war, reduced superpowers, shares, and became the decision of the middle successor officials in the wars, the Washington House, what is Moscow nuclear competition in Russia, and or China Commission president by being placed nuclear on high alert, Moscow, China, this is used and introduced nuclear force to pre-and micro. Normal trade relations is crucial for actual trade to occur. French now, well, trade action terms of the approach and anti personnel, just personnel treatment for trading partnerships with international trade agreements with Cuba that would provide a balance of trade benefits and for issues as for commercial entities with Cuba, such as Cuba, or needed for the safeguard mechanism to prevent market shrinkage due to trade.
We've had the embargo for 50 years. Why hasn't that caused a legitimacy crisis?
Sure, evidence indicates that there's a unilateral uniquely collapsing now. The first piece of evidence is what I see. The Compton evidence indicates that things like China's rise and the diffusion of economic power in the world make multilateral more
So what
important
does
now.
lifting the embargo do to overcome the diffusion of economic
Sure,
power?
it indicates that when we get other allies to share the cost of being like the hegemon with us, and that
What does
we are
lifting the
able to
embargo
work.
do to make other countries want to share the
Sure.
cost?
So the second internal link of the 1AC, things like the Latin American voting blocks, indicates that we would get other countries on board with our initiatives and
Why is
multilateral
on board
forums.
the same thing as burden sharing?
Sure, I have this case that when they're involved in multilateral institutions that necessarily involves things like burden sharing.
Okay, so the plan makes Latin American countries want to
Sure.
engage in multilateral institutions. What does it do to change unilateral U.S. military strategy?
Sure, it's not a question of changing U.S. military policy, but if the
Well,
U.S.
it is because your card said unilateral is unsustainable. That
Sure, I
causes
have the
aggressive
case that as
power
long as we have
transition.
legitimacy and we have the multilateral institutions to sustain that primacy, that is more important than whether we actually change that military doctrine. Obviously, the plan does not
Okay.
change the way the DoD
What's
interacts with the
legitimacy?
world. Sure. It's the last card on the multilateral advantage, the fit more evidence, indicates that legitimacy is the credibility and the way that people
What's
perceive the
credibility?
integrity of the uniform.
What's integrity?
So the way that people perceive whether the U.S. policies are legitimate or not.
You said legitimacy means whether they perceive we're legitimate. What does legitimate mean?
Sure, I have this case that and I can give you an example. There's I don't have
No, I want
a
a
definition of
definition.
what
Okay, if you don't have a
legitimacy or
definition, then
credibility
I'll
is.
just move on.
However,
I'm just going to move on then, it's fine. Transition. Take me through what happens after a Cuba collapse.
sure, the grow evidence indicates that the U.S. would intervene in Cuba, which would distract it from hotspots
Okay.
and other.
So if we intervene in Cuba and we just cover Cuba with United States troops, how could it become a terrorist safe haven?
Sure, I have this case that because there's still no law enforcement in Cuba, there would be
We
a
are the
time
law
lag
enforcement because we
between-
send a bunch of troops.
Sure.
How
No,
could terrorists
eventually the
develop
U.S.
a
would
safe
probably
haven?
intervene in things like the Coast Guard. Yes, that happens. However, there's a time lapse between when Cuba collapses, i.e. becomes a breeding ground for terrorism,
Okay.
and when that effective sort of intervention will
during
occur.
that time lapse, which generously is a couple months, terrorists have to come to Cuba, develop and assemble a nuclear weapon, then launch it against the United States for your scenario to be true, correct?
Sure, I have this case
Okay.
that's possible, yes.
So why do countries start attacking each other in these hotspots when the United States starts looking weak?
Sure, the grow evidence case that when the U.S. military is able to project power to hotspots like Africa, the Caucasus, North Korea, it would cause those countries to be more aggressive in their actions and be more belligerent,
so
which causes an escalation.
if your argument is that countries start attacking each other and get belligerent when capabilities go down, and that unilateral is unsustainable, why is the impact not inevitable?
Sure, our evidence indicates that, first of all, countries like North Korea and Iran, they would look to the U.S. engagement with Cuba as a reason to not be belligerent. That's a conflict resolution internal link. The Dickerson evidence indicates that when the U.S. engages with Cuba, that sends a signal to rogue states that the U.S. is willing to engage with them, which provides
That's
an
not what I was
alternative.
asking
to
about.
belligerent
Your
action.
argument is that the state of nature is if U.S. looks weak, countries start attacking. That is a realist thesis. Why does that not take
Sure,
out
there's a
your
difference between the
multilateral
power
advantage?
projection internal link on the transition advantage and the way that multilateral is able to engage states, right? Our evidence indicates that multilateral is sufficient to resolve those internal links because it gives the actors an incentive to participate with the U.S.
I read this.
Yeah.
It's 3 off transition credibility.
Can I get that FTO?
These guys go for that.
One sec. Cool.
policy engagement requires provision of positive incentives. How to engagement refers to foreign policy strategy depends on positive incentives to achieve the objective. The single drink and strategy that relies on incentive provision incentive. And that means the plan must be accrued to require the talent and incentive for working to put appropriate to change your rate around give your reward. And the plan is that the voting issue limits the function near the top of the UK significant addition the alternative 100 single import or export kits and float the next research running around the KBQ electing coordinator size software involved for politics is a counterpoint to remove condition critique to diplomacy next off the condition competence to U.S. security guarantee that prevent U.S. prevent Saudi Arabia from acquiring nuclear weapons. Gazansky 13 U.S. Saudi Arabia's most effective tools security supported the British on the inclusion under U.S. defense umbrellas document to purchase nuclear deterrent after Iran Saudi Arabia to no more cannon for pearls in the Middle East. Doubts about the reliability of Washington's liability to develop independent nuclear infrastructure, which was as well as purchasing nuclear off-the-shelf product strategic interests cut up the upper hand of the planned cause of Cuban oil drilling, which trades off with security ties at Al Hashim Thor. The proximity to Cuban U.S. is the possibility of massive oil deposits will have a tangible impact. Discovery commercial deposits of oil will defend U.S. energy policy, energy security, and that reverse perception commitment, which for pearl domestic drilling produces lower grade oil, which doesn't trigger link. That's Roger 13. The U.S. are producing low density crude oil, whereas the U.S. imports heavier crude oils from Saudi Arabia. The Persian Gulf are increasingly nervous about the Americans' long-term security commitment to the region. The incredible U.S. security commitment to our partners in the Persian Gulf may be the only way to allay concerns about security challenges in the region. Saudi Arabia caused a nuclear war that's at mid-11 decision by the Saudi government to seek out nuclear weapons. How to destabilizing third more nuclear power would be prone to miscalculation, escalation, multipolar system, allowed stable recruiting incentives for attacking nuclear power, main launch of warning uncertainty would create a trigger regional nuclear war. Next off, so critique the credibility of these persons. So when you see rests on the cult of reputation reality, the assumptions of credibility theory paneling fall, the tango fight two notions underpin the belief system. First, where reputation, one's own position, reputation, not one's own position, right? That one, someone doesn't call puts a problem the wrong way. The second notion is that reputation gained in one round can be transferred to another, believing in the foundation, the foundation of reputation. Puts too far too much value in illusory and states where they have to according to cult logic, when the logic most clearly apply to those states. Constantly fears what others based on reputation, it's based on past behavior, they never sense reputation on the others based on past behavior. Although the cult of reputation prevalent among the decision makers, the cult is just a cult of belief and credibility primes the pump for intervention is crisis escalation. Tango 5 concerned reputation run in the unnecessary blood distance to the international public to move waiting for the sake of credibility during the Cold War 2 superpower to involve countless proxy war conflict for the sake of credibility on many occasions. Politics only justification for plunging in conflict wars and credibility. Certain reputation exposed states manipulation by a state to beat that and fall into entrapment. The states have often ended with commitments in place of which they were initially reluctant because their outspread enemy enterprise. And I was able to force Khrushchev into pledging full nuclear deterrence against the U.S. They called it exasperated hostility between two adversaries, make them less willing to compromise. Fear losing reputation has been a major factor behind reliance in conflict. The reluctance to cut its laws and fight in Vietnam was in large part due to the fear of losing credibility for long crisis against while the state believed that it was already invested too much reputation. And the state believed even the tiniest compromise might have far-reaching consequences. The resultant paradox of credibility, but its credibility nation should intervene in the least significant, compelling, and rewarding case that the signals intended to deter war cannot deter, prevent a war cannot be prevented. And the alternative to questioning affirmative belief and credibility critique is vital to inform your rational foreign policy prescription. 5/10 when the credibility and repaired dry politics state about the hard reputation and relevant circumstances attempts to match the other states or like the liberty policymaker would be wise to be aware the credibility imperative question, the assumption of the consensus and remains scheduled fantastical disasters assign virtually no evidence supporting the conventional wisdom and predominance of evidence suggested obsession with credibility and insecure, misplaced, and malinformed. There is no clear way to control the perceptions of it when the credibility imperative dry policy making use like remain more behavior manifestly pathological ways of foreign policy. The United States could not driven by tangible material measures of interest. However, it could be one way to ensure the goal would be recognized and limit the urge to act in order to bolster credibility onto transition, regional rebalancing, security, diplomacy, the only empirical data goes our way. That's ways to limit hedge civility theory of rips and take compatibility views to maintain civility. U.S. can only police system if other members cooperate. The youth cannot enforce peace upon only 95% of U.S. security guarantees or called to restrain those within those countries would be demonstrating trust without precedent in history. It's hard to think of one of the members of an alliance is armed or allowed another member protect their interests. Other members not sure the same perception threat the U.S. does if there was danger of the strategy of the allies would be different in order for hegemonic stability to add adequate explanation to the allies and demonstrate hegemon outside field. The U.S. demonstrate strategic wisdom so they seem unable to defend by the search for monster destroying the imperial data stress or little connection with U.S. activism stability during the 90s or grew more peaceful while the U.S. cut its forces that arms race and regional rebalancing encouraged the two are unrelated withdrawals of a Taiwan crisis in 2011 curbing the U.S. commitments would reduce the risk of cost of the outweighed by benefits pulling back and focus on core to limit the risk of catastrophic class rather by allowing you to avoid commitments and unwise binary commitments in nature would look unless the head of conflict over Taiwan or maritime claims in South China Sea. And we control unique to Syria interdependent to China war but maintaining belligerent posture in East Asia causes war and lays groundwork for an air sea battle infrastructure glass over 13 and ministers to become adapted invoking monster from abroad to justify belligerent foreign policy rebalancing involved surging American military presence throughout the region to the groundwork and air sea battle with China and Americans as the guarantee of the status quo in Taiwan, the largest naval fronts to the east, Shanxi and South China Sea. This comes to a serious threat. Don't threaten the Chinese. China is an enemy, otherwise you end up with an enemy in China. The economic and their defendants would use strategies risen on unprecedented level left to their own divides. American Chinese would continue to engage in peaceful, mutually beneficial trade. Only Washington going abroad in search for monsters causes into causes belly and air sea battle creates a unique to use or lose mentality. The Turks were the time to level. The U.S. Navy and Air Force have been prepared for the air sea battle. Air sea battle will depend on the upgrade capabilities of our submarine submarine and mine warfare capabilities. Aircraft carriers adopting certain maximal doctrine is playing China and playing the China's hand spinning its entirely superior air sea battle celebrates with serious implications to building crisis managed air sea battle and increase the range of the circumtemporary range of the air sea battle. Emphasis on preempting China by shrinking early to be able to compress the time available for decision makers and crisis that use or losing mentalities like to take hold in the mind the military commanders that was building on escalator where sea battle calls or deeper strikes on the Chinese such an attack means constructions and attempt to preemptively destroy Chinese retaliatory options would be hardly limited to dramatic escalation beyond the nuclear threshold. No risk of nuclear terror. That's what top Chev 114 obtaining physical materials. No easy manner enriching uranium requires facility. No terrorists have to acquire materials. No blind memory required supply, which is now 30 materials are returned under our control. Active technology with detection nuclear device built under conditions can hardly be reliable given the lack of special and testing capabilities. It would be difficult to avoid errors. The handling materials would be put terrorists on the radar and onto credibility. Current multilateral institutions are incapable of dealing with crisis factor. The backing to national institutions alone are unable to cope global research. The international organization capable of breaking the global capital and risk. The world societies in the industry can most of the national mechanisms bilateral, multilateral agreement, transitional corporation, civil society groups. There's increasing on these kind of world so poverty can WTA regulate trade. These should not constitute sufficient means for maintaining global risk and nationalism. Cost effective multilateral the home state really do governments agree around the means to address the fundamental change to commanders to debate clashes over world these Simon multilateralism leading to paralysis. It requires political and multilateralism in the means by which regional blocks block action countries predetermined outs cannot negotiate until the EU is taken a position. EU strong arms sense it's about US position integrated discussion must take place. Blur objectives diplomats are unable to advance and
skip ahead to this one.
And the plan's quick fix diplomacy hurts long-term legitimacy of the Tel 7 developing message and makes the policy seem attractive, nothing to address the root of the international grievances that use the cards and is attempting to sell policy without transaction in the undermines international opinion and influence and diplomats require patient. America's current first seems to be focused on quick fix and strategy must be first on reflecting on policy participating in climate change and multilateral diplomacy. One is the substance and addressing public diplomacy or currently single unipolar policy don't consult legitimacy parties only raising expectation, dashing up to access and the impact of warfare none the key reason for skepticism about the usability of spearhead global institutions strengths and lack of power like legitimacy on the same example of refuse to allow leaders legitimacy in the squad states but well positioned to reshape the institutional after emerging victorious from the titanic struggle. Legitimacy based on belief on action the properties capital international action may be seen as an illegitimate class market and reversal president in Guantanamo Bay. I'll call 1AC Henry 11, though he was enough to recur the transform religion to Cuban improving some credit being Guantanamo stood as a symbol of American imperial infringement on Cuba's sovereignty ever since.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Saudi decide. The Algiers Mars card is the only piece of evidence in the 1NC specific to Cuba indicates that Cuba would have a tangible impact on U.S. energy policy. Where does it indicate that tangible impact means trading off with U.S. oil from Saudi Arabia or the U.S. commitment to Saudi Arabia?
It's predicated off the belief from the Saudis that the U.S. is in a situation where it would be able to shift away from energy.
Sure. So what is the threshold for Saudi Arabia believing that we have a credible security?
We'd say that there's enough oil in Cuba to warrant that switch.
I mean,
That's
why you're
so once it is perceived by Saudis, then the U.S. might have the ability to obtain Saudi oil, then they would freak out or obtain Cuban.
I think the threshold is a sustainable supply of heavy crude oil.
Cool. Let's talk about the critique. It seems to me like the dissent and the critique have a little bit of tension. You read a piece, you read a dissent about why the credibility of the security guarantee is important and why credibility as a thing is not real.
It's an even statement.
Even if credibility is true. So first we think credibility not a thing. But even if you're right about credibility, you specifically destroy credibility in this instance.
Sure. So the credibility is true in the case of the dissent, but
no. We think credibility is just not true.
Not true.
But if it is true, then
okay, cool. Is the alternative to the critique conditional?
Yes.
And in case that you should question the app's belief in credibility, does that mean you reject the affirmative, or can the affirmative still occur in the word?
It can still occur.
It can still occur. Okay. So the impact of the critique is just intervention in crises. I guess what intervention does the app specifically?
Okay, sure. So we see that credibility justifies a ton of intervention. The I think it's our Tang evidence indicates that Vietnam, the U.S. has continued intervention.
So I'm
in
guessing
Vietnam
why.
is an
So
example
Vietnam
of
is about the
credibility.
perception of U.S. credibility vis-a-vis the Soviet Union during the Cold War, maintaining the
Yeah,
perception
we
of a
still think
hardline
that
posture. Why is
we still think
multilateralism the same
we
thing?
still think the belief in credibility, however, is still active like today. So other things like
So,
other
Your
I'm
argument is
asking why-
like, I can clear it up for you if you'd like. Your argument is just like, the multilateral order and the liberal order need to be credible so countries want to cooperate. We think that that justifies intervention in favor of the liberal
How?
order. Sorry?
I'm wondering why that's the same kind of intervention in the liberal order as
Because it's still a
credibility in the hard power
justification.
sense.
It's still a justification that relies on credibility, so it's that same logic. Our evidence
Okay.
says that the liberal order has justified interventions in the past. The context of the 1AC, you say power transitions and rival states are a problem, which means that the idea of the liberal order
point of
needs
the
to be
1AC
credible
is to
vis-a-vis
integrate them
could
into
cause
the
an
international order and not to attack them. I'm wondering what the internal link is.
Sure, but the logic of the 1AC justifies
Okay,
the
that's
opposite.
fine. Let's talk about the air sea battle turn on case. Your evidence indicates that the U.S. is developing things like submarines and like mine warfare and aircraft carriers. What does the app have to do with the fact that U.S.
Okay,
is
sure.
developing
So
a
the
military
app says
capability?
that if there were to be a Cuban collapse, we would have to withdraw our security priorities and other.
We would be
areas.
it would collapse the perception of U.S. power protection. What does it indicate that
No,
we no
so
longer
the
develop
key
things like
thing
submarines?
the key thing with the turn is that it's U.S.'s presence in the South China Sea. So by
So
having
do you have to win that the
presence
app leads to the withdrawal of all U.S.
That's
troops
your
from the
argument.
that's
South
your
China Sea?
argument. You,
I'm not really sure where
You're
the
like,
one
we have to send
You
all
have
of our
to send- we have
troops
to
to
send-
East
that's
Asia. Go take breath.
If I can get the flashlight back, please. We'll have it.
Yeah. Can you pass it down?
Okay. Order is multilat, transition, T, the K, and the Z. Okay.
multilateralism is unsustainable, causes Asian transition, wars, go nuclear. Now all of their multilateral fields about multilateral institution, the status of the plan, so use leadership within the institution because it allows to get allies on board, ensures Latin regulation, which solves their voting blocks, argument also leads to interest convergence because we are able to shape the interest of everyone's past internationalism, the impact of national, that actually says regional blocks is the reason why we do not have influence over overseas. The plan probably solves for the non-quick diplomacy isn't bad because it allows the reshape how we frame our relation to Latin America. Second is not a quick fix. The plans allow for broader relation such as, for example, closing on time in the future. Now, single policy does not lead to legitimate crisis because all of our evidence is based on how the world order is changing. Multi-economic policy like solve small state challenges. The reason why U.S. is failing right now, not just the human policy. Have the human policy still sufficient to solve for all the reasons why multilateral is failing. Now, Gimbel's not all positive plan is sufficient because embargoes such as symbolic, which has been going on for 50 years and affects all of Cuba's trade and also has extraterritorial measures which may appear issue comparatively than Guantanamo. Go on to transition first. Nuclear terror conflict leads to escalation. Cuba becomes a field. Cuba becomes at least a legitimacy crisis and also because this is Caribbean instability. Now there is rebalance. There's no rebalance. It doesn't matter because we solve our transition to a sustainable hegemonic structure. Now social science produces multiplayer supports the natural and seven strides by fighting that's war for the nine people are mainly motivated instrument pursue potential ways to physical security matter. Zero prosperity. We let people motivate natural and most social change the most important instead of hardware. Human research human speed hardware sensitivity styles gameplay generous viewers sensitive to bipolar multiple direct competition with least now the power continue for higher speed and good velocity face compared to Louis and 7 translate. That person calls actually absent and 7 might be social side positional good competition percent be 0. So now our advantage is based on my equity security discourse multiple independent field support or hegemony advantage as Wolford and 9 million stream theory policy that states some rules for internal stats will only come to implication security and uncertain that is undermined people reaching discipline for neuroscience, biology, economics, sociology, pathology that can be a motive observer favorable social science research suggest a preference size the basic disposition now no Taiwan crisis because we allow China to get into the international system convenience of peaceful war. That's Fuji motive evidence. Now second is an interdependent doesn't China war because they will households into the US maintains as much multilateral status as possible. However, unilateral status means that there will be backlash as possible. That means that they have to be proxy wars to try and intervene. Now second ARC does not solve because it's a hedging strategy, not a continuing strategy. It exists within a U.S. policy accommodating China's Russia and embedding U.S. primacy within the multilateral institution solves the impact also proves that retrenchment is more likely to collapse multilateral order. That's Roy in 13. Washington so will congested China's right center cuts the lesion containing China's the U.S. preference of Washington just by certain headings for the ARC battle conflict. The key features of the order multilateral institution liberal and depressing to Asia Pacific states whether the liberal order support Washington continues to replace the Chinese states launches and narrowly serves Beijing's interests. Her use policies less than inequitable than voice which fight between hegemons. Also, we do not lead to intervention in the plan allows for peaceful transition brings Chinese system that was above and yes, nuclear terror, the car zones in Korean civil war, they can have recruitment groups also because we cannot monitor that as well when we don't have the resources and multi commitment strategies. Now go on to topicality first. We counter-intervention engagement must be unconditional. As Smith in 5 the cases in case requirement but economically conditionally cautious looking perceived benefits other states fulfillment economical condition engagement implies time no such attack conditional hashes that refer first is ground saying no means there are no Cuba benefits left under this interpretation at all and these limits requiring conditional engagement allows infinite numbers possible to read are more than sees predictably the fact that their emphasis what interpretation means is unpredictable. Also, we have to intensify. They have to go through 2 words to get the interpretation. We only have to go through 1. Down limits are also another listing 3 topic countries solved. Now lit checks and beats and markets call the topic default to reasonably competing interpretation increase the reasonable and promotes interpretation designs to limit on the app. Now go on to the criticism. First, conditionality is the voting issue. First is 2 ways to prevent effective allocation of office. Most important option. Second, decision making concessions. Argue understanding logical argument interaction. Other decision was the most undercovered position. Counter dispositionality solved. Now PerfCon is an independent voter. They can't care representations are credibly used. Those reps on the disaster that app. Now second, floating picture a voter to reject the team to turn back Brad Packman's composition strategy and first it makes it impossible to because we never defend a single organization in the back. We also be kicked steal all of our office we pretty much get the app without the reputation. It's functionally new advocacy has to go onto the K proper. First is frame the K must prove that the whole plan that we the app is vital fair particular engagement valid. Just seeing the plans and documents test with then ask for a competitive alternative. Now vote after despite prior pressures impact time frame means you gotta act on the best info available that's Tortoshville in a pragmatic approach down to be ontology method of the acting being since it's specific situations we have to act in a time pressure case to implement the to the place preempt diagnostic shortcuts we cannot draw generally rather be special in particular cases their statements of crucial element of time and no impact the app decreases intervention which changes perceptions of the countries in multilateral institutions. At best research concludes negative studies that in fact ignore the effects of reputation in general to Charles Weisinger and Yarli Milo and Tad Harris several significant as historic studies that found surprisingly little evidence that the leadership has spread is influenced by the points of being password to the game theory model justification and reputation against powers and incorrect reputation actually versus the essence of opponents that is the effect of reputation will be most apparent level general to Charles' findings because scientific theory and quantitative analysis restore the conventional wisdom. Now their methodology that studies is biased because only reviews reputation in context of specific prices where states don't make decisions regarding reputation because already been factored into the calculus. Weisinger and Yarhi Milo intend the international relations work with reputation for the characterized between theoretical statistical work to see reputation for basic qualitative work. They found little to recommend significant this is Joshua Bryce. We must understand which reputation work studies that judgment reputation current interest is much in detailed skills against finding this work for reputation information including past action will already have the incorporating broad answers from your region historical evidence supports this argument. Now their impact card is clearly about
deterrence where we have the affirmative institutional power, which is key, different because it shows the US as a benign power, which means we do not link down credibly over the winnings use force matters as empirically valid proximity instead of the concept of repetition learning, application, strong because perhaps inside the international relation learning is this to be experienced in the states from the experience of other states diagnostic in the states between others, updated ability to interpret others in bigger case, or diffuse and state repeat by their experience which are not directly involved. States rely on information other learned powers as to the direction and crisis distribution now permutation do both and reps don't affect realities empirically deny that's Kaufman in 91 hostile never present war because these factors being hard as a virtue of symbolic stages symbol flushing place by peace is more common than war even the hostile never severe violence can be avoided at least defined these in moderate ways and collaborate all fails co-option political engagement is key to McCormick intend the shift away from security government to shift powers and power and equal citizens have no way of controlling states. The shift away from security is not challenge statistical theories argue that secret must be social theories to show mark black communities without communities make critical parts of my critical theories become nothing more than a request that people became a nicer way critical theories that are lack of concrete analysis rather than them unable to actually engage. And I go on to the oil disaster. The disaster link is inevitable and other things matter more, but relations are fundamentally resilient. That's Gardner in 1023. The Saudis are upset not to break a cooperation in Washington's Arab partnership now suffering the biggest risk in 9/11. Saudi Arabia turning down Syria. U.S. Security Council Saudi intelligence chief had told European diplomats major shift relations with U.S. of Washington relatively yet in Syria not being listened to. Saudis want offset their various of the mission. The Saudis include one of the Americans who goes off foreign brand guarding the taste of that account Saudi security. The Saudi princes for shocked at how cool Washington banning is more backwards as Arabs swim from the power they stand up and the same which will happen. Know the U.S. is due self-sufficient world interest in the shield. Saudi Arabia swing produce world as a client of the shift in the U.S. announcement of a shift to the Asia Pacific. Saudi Arabia has used to grow looking on the umbrella side of the U.S. military press. Now they're looking in the future they may no longer because none of these Saudi complaints led to her to enter France security pact endured the Arab and by 9/11 cooperating counterterrorism have the plan also solves the link because we allow for increased cooperation in the Arab there will be continued security commitments and Saudi Arabia is running out of oil. This is nevertheless Makillah in 814. One of WikiLeaks revelations will accomplish away from U.S. diplomats has been convinced by the Saudi oil expedition data the nation's oil reserve overstating even 40% of the political uncertainty of Middle Eastern oil reserves. The economy states their own covered oil reserves. There's no true unambiguous number of oil reserves. Oil isn't key means relations and security commitments are nevertheless Bronson insists there's more to it than oil. Washington relation media hardly or close to the friendly terms of oil predictions such as Jordan, Egypt, is traditionally also relation to oil states, which is Libya and Iran. And case solves the and U.S. projections and outpace consumption that non-unique to the link that's Wilma inheriting U.S. another base of entry into producing nearly 2,000 more barrels of oil. They import recovered 6.7 million barrels of oil per day. That's year. Oil inputs drop more than 72% and no profitable oil in Cuba. It's too deep. That's good. Cuba in 13. Cuba suffering regions deploying several countries. Finding oil is very deep on crude. Is finding working highly expensive operation cost about 100 million each exploratory operation. Oil companies are like to spend $11 capital dollars more from Singapore to Brazil, Angola, and Alaska. U.S. go from their new Roy Marks and Argentina. Now the material links controls the perception link. Saudi Arabia won't proliferate until we actually leave the Middle East, which will never happen. No Saudi pro-life Lippman in 11 highly unlikely Saudi Arabia, which requires nuclear arsenal is capable of acquisition, will be provocative, extremely difficult, and will be more likely we can keep the king has committed itself to economic development that fails from the open and man's global market to become nuclear. Allah will be fatal. The Saudi relaxed industrial technology to develop. Each weapons and knows how we purchase them with these sales. The entire region of Saudi Arabia will know will not be in the country's best interest either, so for stability.
We'll take some breath. Okay, these 33 seconds. Yeah, sure.
So the Wolford card you have seems to me like a defensive unipolarity.
The Wolford card, yes, it is defensive unipolarity. Under the app, we are still unipolar.
What?
We are the leading hegemon under the app. There's a difference between unilateralism and unipolarity.
Okay, so in how does power sharing happen if the U.S. is still head of the multipolar?
Right. Obviously, other countries can still hold power under a unipolar system. It's a question of how the U.S. leads these.
No, the way that you framed the multilateralism advantage seemed to me like it was a U.S. stepping aside and sharing power with other countries. How
Yes,
can
it
that
does.
still
It
be
does.
how can that still be
Power.
unipolar?
But the U.S. is still the leader. It is still the hegemon. It's still the one that actually
Right, how can that happen?
coalesces all of the countries together so they can have effective solutions.
Okay, how can that happen?
What do you mean?
Like, how can you share power but have one person with the most power?
You can share. Yes, I think that's completely possible.
Yeah.
Like, if you share power, that doesn't mean everyone has equal power. Rather, you can have a leader who has more power and other states who have less
Okay,
power. I mean,
sure,
it gives
so
the perception that the U.S. is a
that's
benign
fine,
leader
okay.
and will account taking the interest like other states' interests when deciding like international problems,
So
not just its own.
the U.S. is at the head, just kind of like distributing whatever like power it wants. to.
Right, the advantage allows us
Okay,
to
sure. Okay, that's
transform
fine.
the way
So
people
in the
view
instance
the
of a
US
Cuban
in the
collapse,
international system.
How would terrorists actually move into Cuba, develop a nuclear weapon, and launch it?
When there's instability in the Caribbean that allows terrorists to go there and recruit new
Right, but
people,
Cuba is
also
90 miles off the Florida coast. Why would we not immediately jump on that and
the
shut
fact
it
that,
down?
yeah, exactly. Our partisan account says the fact that we might immediately jump on that might start an insurgency, which would actually increase instability in the region because other
Cuba is
countries
only
would get
so
involved.
large. How can terrorists successfully build and launch a nuclear weapon?
It's not that they're building and launching a nuclear weapon on Cuba. It's that they are going to the region and recruiting and getting more influence, expanding.
Wait, so they
reach
are
across the
launching a
world.
weapon from Cuba?
Not necessarily launching from
Okay.
Cuba. It allows their terrorist organization to expand their reach into the Caribbean, which makes it more likely they, for example, they might be able to smuggle weapons to the U.S. They might be able to get more recruits to develop newer technology. All these things are reasons why it's probably a bad idea for Cuba to become unstable.
Okay, sure. So why would the okay, so I guess onto the credit advantage. Why would the AF result in a shift in U.S. military priorities?
Yeah, I think this is the answer to the YC. The AF does not lead to a complete reversal of doctrine by the U.S. However, it does change other countries' perceptions about the U.S. So even if we are not 100% multilateral in our doctrine, it doesn't matter.
Right. So now, right now, what causes a lot of problems?
Right.
With
The
the
key
US,
internal
right now, what
Latin
causes a lot of problems for the U.S. is its unilateral military stances in certain areas.
The
so how
plan
does the
allows
plan change
Latin
that
America countries to get on board with the U.S. and form voting blocs.
So
it
Latin American countries
support.
now decide to support U.S. military interaction?
It's not just military instructions, it's how the U.S. changes and exports its
right, but so why would the U.S.
world.
ever decide to change? And
We're not saying that we would decide to change. It makes the fact that we have Latin American countries on board makes it seem more legitimate because we have support of a voting bloc in international institutions.
Okay, I'm good. So I used another 47, and I had 927. So what is the math? 840. You're a genius. So he's kind of frightening. You know, we have most of the stand, just not all of them. So let's just get the leg. Yeah. My computer kind of randomly shut off, so it'll take just a second to start back up.
Do you know when prep time starts?
Yeah, wrote it down. 8:40. 8:40, yeah. The order is going to be Saudi Prolif, cred, transition, critique. Study Perla credit transition. Still need to remember teal, right? Or did I save it on this? I don't think I did. Okay, I'll pull it up.
No, we don't have the 2NC.
Yeah, I'm gonna save it on the flash drive. Turned off like as I was doing that. Who'd y'all have last debate?
We debated St. Mark's Dam.
Cool. Real acronym.
We negated.
What'd you say?
Huh?
What'd you say?
We said that you should normalize trade relations except for the part of trade relations that does IPR.
Cool. IPR is bad.
Well, no, IPR leadership is good, but the part of the embargo that does IPR collapses
Oh,
it.
gotcha.
Yeah.
What'd they say?
They said permutation, do this kind of
Yeah.
or like,
That's
like
what I thought.
because it's like a pig and it's like piece is like kind of it's like there's like the text of like a bill that's like and then you like pick out the one part of
Amy
it.
was telling us about it last night.
Oh really? Yeah. It was
Who
like
judged?
Amy Polly. The other team was not happy.
yeah. I mean, it was just like a really messy debate because they read like 4 advantages in the one AC that had like a ton of impacts, and we only like read 3 off, so there was like a ton of stuff on the case. And then, yeah, it was just like, and then case ended up like not mattering that much, so it was just like a strange debate, I guess. Who did you debate last round?
We debated Saul and Malika.
Alright, yeah, I forgot about that.
Okay, we're gonna save it now. Sorry for the delay.
No, I understand. I had the shittiest laptop my senior year. It was awful. I even ended up using the viewer for like all my debates because it just, because I had a Mac too, so like flashing on a Mac is so awful.
We just installed like a PC side of our Mac.
I didn't want to do this because the dual boot up because it would just take up all of my computer space. So.
I couldn't imagine debating on the like Mac side of the Mac. It's
Yeah, I did
so
that.
bad.
Well, I ended up using the viewer honestly for most of my debates, and then we kind of use my Mac as a viewer for ourselves every once in a while.
Am I on your charger? Sorry.
Yeah, the fact that you can't just pull the flash drive out just kills prep time.
Great. Okay. Everyone good? Great. We're not going through this. I can see there's no impact relations or resilient, which takes on the offense they have now. The credibility page, there's zero chance the absolves disadvantage. Guantanamo Bay targeted killing already alienate the international community. Their competent evidence says that anti-Americanism is what is collapsing the United States legitimacy, which means any source of anti-Americanism is sufficient to collapse the affirmative. The 2 we see on this page just kind of asserts that the embargo is a symbol. Obama's strategy is already unilateral. That is the thesis of the 1AC. They can't get out of this by saying that they're by saying that they are symbolic, or that they create different voting blocks, because other countries in the international community obviously pose us on different issues. Even if Latin American countries side with us on every single issue, that's obviously not enough to generate a majority in multilateral forums. That also means the United States just continues to strong our multilateral forums, which results in the same resentment and backlash that their evidence is talking about. They ready piece of Woolforth evidence on the other page that status competition is the driving force of international relations. That logically takes out the multilateralism advantage, because it means the countries will always oppose a unipolar system. They will always challenge the United States hegemony, even if it is acting through a multilateral forum. The embargo has also been around for over 40 years. There hasn't been a legitimacy crisis. Multilateral, their Dickerson evidence from a lieutenant colonel in the military has like 0 warrants. Proves the affirmative is necessary but not sufficient. Even if the embargo is bad for credibility, lifting it doesn't solve all of it. Their second internal link is from the Hinderdale, who's a master's candidate, says that Iran and North Korea will love us, which should say a lot of stuff about his credibility, because obviously they won't just because we lift the embargo. There's a cap on interest convergence because of nationalist incentives. Extend multilateral fails. Our Holmes evidence says that there are too many differing views, which means multilateral forums can never come to a consensus. Power dispersion also takes out the case they've already established. The sworn force held in all 13 economic and political part of the multilateral grinding system and gridlock. Multilateral grinding system deals with climate negotiations for 2 decades. Funding goes away to some global mission. With parallel phase of global insecurity, global cooperation, because previous phase global cooperation been reducing appetite consequences for problem-solving capacities of the institutions that have created them. Failures can never lead to weakness of NGOs and domestic political landscape. Multilateral cooperation installed in the air system, equal welfare, tiers, field states, market instability, the brand versatile climate change, grid lines, fundamental feature of the way for reasons for gridlock, like multiple institutional inertia, hard problems, industry fragmentation, many more countries representing diverse range of interests must agree for global cooperation to occur. Mark the card that occurred. They see they changed framing with Latin America. No, they don't, because we still have the drug war and racist immigration laws. They still perceive that we are interested in exerting hegemony over Latin America, which causes opposition. Latin America also doesn't solve all U.S. initiatives. Transition page. Oh, actually, one more argument on that page. No impact of power transition, grid power bargaining solves as Chatterphone and the level of results shows commitment problem can be avoided. Results shows no matter how large perhaps the power transition shift from relative power cannot be exponential for place will lead to other fields limiting their ability to attack hard to create demilitarized since 1914 French Prime Minister ordered troop control along the French urban border. The political talks offense will continue this crisis case with direct conflict was avoided by negotiating Gorbachev's reductions had the come to make its price attack almost the choice chose that little French people avoided for Washington table trade 1922 most example was recent example states bargaining for power to east tensions created by different relative growth reinforced almost never comes to do not negotiate over the relative power to avoid power case situation. Now the transition page. There's no reason we would withdraw from hotspots. We can still maintain our capabilities in the region. Their impact evidence is from a lieutenant colonel painting a worst case scenario in Cuba. It doesn't mean we can't do anything to manage escalation, especially if we still have troops in South Korea and Japan. Utilize unsustainable last for the first page, which means the impact is inevitable. If it is sustainable, then it solves the other advantage. They see social science. This means it has competition, so root causes conflict, which I explained on the other page. This card establishes that we should abandon the idea of credibility and focus on our material capabilities, which is the alternative. It's an impact turn to multilateralism because there's inevitable power diffusion, which means status competition takes out the case. Also, they see the plans key solve hotspots. There's no impact U.S. capabilities, which also takes out any offense and the Asia part of the debate. Our Fat West evidence says the best statistical evidence worse on breakout because we reduce our military commitments. They only escalate when we overdo it. Massive defense cuts in the 1990s prove other countries do not see retrenchment as a blank check to start wars. If the state and nature of countries attack weaker countries, then multilateralism is obviously incoherent. Nuclear terrorism deterrence strikes all of their hotspots. They need to win wars break out at the exact moment the Cuba collapses, which is nonsense. Bosco, their author, 06. The theories and efforts to predict other major parts eventually being against China's America. Hard to find much evidence until another fact working in favor of great power caution. Nuclear weapons, insulation, emergency hotline, national campus recognition, need for fast and communication times of crisis, terrorism impact, absolute nonsense because we would code the service of Cuba and the United States troops, which means it doesn't become a failed state. There's also no nuclear terrorism. He only said we can't monitor, but they can't get the bomb, they can't acquire physical material, they can't test it, they can't build complex facilities. There's no supply on the black market. All the stolen materials have been returned. They also couldn't, it wouldn't be reliable or deployable because they don't have the capability to do so. Our evidence is from January 25th of this year. Their evidence is outdated critique. Our Fat Boys evidence contextualizes this argument pretty well. The foreign policy of the United States is not driven only by tangible material measures of interest. However, it should be. They are missing an internal link. Our criticism points out that logically, if their advantage presumes credibility is deployed effectively, that it's necessary to solve international conflicts. But they have no academic defense of credibility as the theory I or in the context of the affirmative. Asserting the plan as a symbol doesn't overcome a multiplicity of complex concerns that shape other countries' decision calculus. The underlying thesis of liberal IR theory is that there are benefits to cooperation, opportunity cost to opting out of that, which means if multilateral is actually a good thing, then liberalism will always exist. The second advantage is realist, which takes out multilateralism. I explained that in the cross-section. The embargo was put in place to show the credibility and resolve against communism. The after-resurrection logic, which turns the whole case impact debate Belief in credibility causes war and takes out the case, increases the propensity for intervention because nations fight proxy wars to maintain their credibility and commitment to international initiatives. Politicians have historically justified staying the course and dozens of wars to maintain credibility. The absent idea of rising powers justifies violent intervention to protect the international order, which I explained in the cross-section. It increases the scope and severity of conflicts because we view reputation as a sunk cost. Once we start a conflict, we will never stop it because we want to demonstrate our commitment to that conflict, our commitment to the liberal order. It also causes horizontal escalation because we get drawn into a bunch of conflicts to support our allies. Their multilateral advantage contextualizes this pretty well because we would have to do everything for everybody. There is no burden sharing. The credibility imperative causes threat, inflation, shuts down deliberation, which is the dissent of the perm fat by 10. The credibility imperative produces Scotty hyperbole, hogs by the floodgates open to a variety of catastrophes, lead to destruction of civilization. Credibility imperative forms momentum towards the abyss can begin with a small demonstration of irresolute domain consequential one stage to frame such influence becomes understood to law policymakers pay cost of the presidency and avoid unlimited disaster in the future, triggering impossible outcomes pathological and everything necessary to explain how this catastrophe is created or mere suggestion that inaction can lead to sufficient to shut down those who object how it seems distressing and willing to accept predictions catastrophe. Really, the policymakers stand those that shut down zero intervenes. Establishing the logical connections is never important establishing the potential offers for catastrophe. The public meant to accept these warnings is unfaithful and understand the elite have more experience and expertise. Bracing foreign policy decisions on credibility causes allied free riding and U.S. overstretch, which turns the level of perennial occupation U.S. diplomacy perceived need to reach your allies. Such concerns justify fighting credibility was made in terms of reputation possibility. Allies would abandon us with suggestion U.S. leaders. Over this sense, we should take our allies' hands by realignment of skeptics. Every incentive to make us worry little incentive to do excess preserve credibility get across the allies free or bleed Washington. Keep foreign resources shaking difference pondering billions ultimately believes one we could mention the public support engagement about locating cost of burden pokes us in opportunity to be a better position to respond in place of better worrying less about credit that have real benefits. Other states willing to do more U.S. allies less likely to engage in dangerous provocative actions. Their own playing hard to get reduced. Likely to views will be perceived to trigger heavy police worrying less about credibility way get others to do more and resent what we do less. It turns multilateralism because we make a concession, expect more in the future, but because we've already shored up our credibility. But when other countries don't reciprocate, the multilateral order collapses on itself because the concessions don't exist. Conditionality will be in the one or per side about an issue we made, and even if statement you can point it out and hurts our ethos, floating kicks and framework will be in the one or they say no impact. We should act on best information. Their information is not good enough. It only results in active mania and threat inflation, which I impact trend above. They say that our arguments about deterrent credibility. I interlink to the multilateralism advantage, which proves that this is contextual to the FDC. Reputation is key to deterrence. Game theory does not apply because it supports realist materialism, which is the thesis of our criticism. The one in our will read cards of credibility fails. They say reputation. We only consider reputation for specific crises. Obviously, those are the ones that escalate. They haven't read impacts to a general theory of reputation. They see our impacts about deterrence. That's answered above. They say credibility is uniquely valid. They have no arguments that deterrence credibility is going to collapse right now, which also proves that this is not a net benefit to voting affirmative. They say permutation be both. If we win a link argument, it means a permanent severance, which is voting for a negative ground. I explain the link arguments in the overview. We have two others. First, the idea that anti-Americanism collapses the whole international order as per their corruption evidence is empirically not inevitable because there will always be anti-American sentiment that is a specific interlink to intervention to quell anti-Americanism, like in the Middle East too. The idea Obama can make countries come to the negotiating table as per their Dickerson evidence is nonsense because they'll negotiate only if it suits their interests. Iran didn't come to the table because they love us. They did it because of sanctions. Their foreign policy roadmap is incapable of maintaining cooperation, which turns the case. They see represents shape reality. Our interlinks deny that. They see that the alternative gets co-opted. The one hour will answer that. But this card's about the shift away from security, which is not our argument.
We'll take prep.
We'll take prep. Oh, you're taking prep? Great. We'll use yours. Cool. Okay, here's what I need you to read. So you got a framework. Put T at the bottom. I don't know.
Stop prep.
8 seconds.
Okay, now start our prep.
Okay.
No, you just read it off my computer. We used another 19 seconds. So that should be... Yep. Okay.
All your credibility cards on the K, they seem to be in the context of things like this Cold War and like Vietnam, where we need to maintain military and like deterrent credibility. How does this relate to like institutional credibility and seen as legitimate?
Yeah, so your advantage says that the liberal order needs to be strong so that rising powers don't fight each other. The idea that some powers are rising or that they are increasing in status, we think is denied by a bunch of empirical facts.
What does that have to do with credibility, though?
That is what credibility... Well, first of all, I don't think that you're going to like point out that we're not talking about credibility when you have not provided a definition of what you're talking about. Like the 1AC cross-lex,
The
I asked what legitimacy was and what credibility was.
Institutions. Your cards are about military credibility.
Right. We have some cards that are definitely about deterrence credibility, but it's also about the credibility of the institutions that the United States support.
Okay, so I guess I can ask you about your impact then. How does our form of credibility, like institutional credibility, lead to interventionism?
Right. What I'm saying is you can't make distinctions about credibility until you can define credibility, which you can't. Also, our argument is institutional credibility means the United States shoulders too many burdens within those institutions and gets drawn into conflicts that we have no material connection to on behalf of the international order.
But we shoulder because we have credibility in institutions.
Right, like the Syria example is really good for this. Syria poses no security threat to the United States. The only reason
credibility. That's why
not
Syria
finished answering your question.
The
only reason we would have intervened in Syria is if we shouldered the multilateral burden of doing so. That would have escalated a crisis. Instead, we were like, it poses no security threat to us, so we should not intervene. That is how the alternative would make policy decisions.
So the alternative, what is the alternative framing of policy then?
It's to question the belief in credibility and act instead based on material interests.
So we act on a realist principle then? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. The case stuff. Why does withdrawal from hotspots, why does like realism, the Wolfworth evidence that says unipolarity mean that multilateralism cannot exist?
The Wolfworth evidence says that the driving force of international relations is status competition. Our argument is the United States should stop playing the game of status competition, which that in and of itself is a check on escalation, because we're no longer escalating conflict for the sake of status.
Right, but how do you deal
if countries are inevitably competing for status, they don't want to cooperate with
let's talk about your first point though. What happens if other countries compete for status and they trigger the conflict, then what happens? How do you
that conflict wouldn't escalate because the US didn't participate. There are also, here's the other argument.
If someone attacks us, how do we not participate?
There are material justifications for multilateral institutions. There is a cost to opting out of multilateral institutions. That is the
right, I understand that, but if
another country
attacks us, how do we opt out of confrontation?
How do we opt out of confrontation? Through the alternative.
Through the alternative?
Yes. By
changing our policy, we do not, if another country attacks us, what do we do?
If another country attacks us, like by all means, fight that war, but other countries aren't going to attack us.
Okay, so your argument is predicated off the fact that no country will attack us.
Why would they? We have like 2 oceans to protect us, a huge military, there's no material justification for that to occur.
I see a flash.
Yeah.
But I can just point them out in the 2NC document if you want.
Sure.
You have the 2NC pulled up?
Yes.
Okay. So do your thing and then I'll point to the stuff on the 2NC document after you're done with that.
Maybe I should be better than where it's around. So the order is going to be the critique with condo, and then framework, and then E-man stuff, and then T.
So theory, framework, and then still on the K?
Yeah, and then T. You guys got it? Okay. You're not ready?
Conditionality is good counterinterpretation, 2 counterinterpretation, 2 frameworks, F. What?
One conditional.
1 conditional. F has a broad range of thoughts for a test proposal, test with justification, nuance, advocate, introduction, ideology, diverse argument for the F within the political middle ground, defeating the right and left simultaneously required nuance off and down political extremism, real world skills, Obama defend healthcare for right and left, the most portable decision making, decision argue, yes, no, but find the best balance, condition, last negative box, and the affirmative means, must prove their proposal, the best policy option, options in the correct direction, ideologically false argument, innovation, debaters, the risk averse conduct, different options, 2 ways to interpret it, different forms of education and process the decision on which arguments to raise critical development, affirmative real world critical thinking skill, education, educational claims and erudite after considered perpetuate rational persuade theories, 1-5, the trade-off time and no user inevitable perm speeds, DST, T violation reaction, 2 words, and egg burners, debate, massive number that's makes child made inevitable, and also the K proper, the judge's intellectual passing judgment on the one is rather than be complicit with the description of the word critically interrogate, non-production framework is a non-starter, the critique is an impact church of the credibility advantage, we win frame of the perm in the altar relevant and voting negative also supports the plan whether the plan should be enacted is relevant to the ballot voting negative does not preclude lifting lifting the embargo, we don't steal the planned agreement. It's not that forcing us to disagree illogically. I.e., we can agree that lifting the embargo is a good idea to prevent Cuban collapse, but disagree that credibility is good. A reductive debate requires finding points of agreement that's a controlling impact that forces us to disagree. Deprioritize critical perspective and background outweighs afterground in the sense to get a critical engagement is substantively important. That debate curriculum should be constructed to train students how to productively disagree and critically engage. And conceptual inquiry is a prerequisite for constructive policy discussion. Only the curriculum is established can ensure meaningful political debate that's correct. 8. Conceptual inquiry, prerequisite empirical research while understanding the ways we apply concept we risk conducting something we cannot justify, we just not being able to understand how to account of different and not being able to engage in protection for dates of the ways we analyze the world or according to the assumptions we make with philosophical investigation not being embraced by one aspect of an evaluate justification. There are infinite potential justifications for any policy debates. A space for contestation ideas, not policy prescription failure. To evaluate the one sees justification include excludes vital conceptual education called the role confusion, no groundless editorial controls ensure parity. They should be able to prepare to defend their advantage when you have to capital checks races from that language and for the after narrative debate argument they can defend as a foundation productive for the agents and controlling impact and supremacy policy. Crowds out critical questions causes zero policy failure. Biswas 7 the most secret threat in the intellectual vocations and cultural expertise would focus on impersonal methodologies and willingness to use by power scholars to be feel the need to formulate their conclusion entirely in terms of policy was a mathematical question irreducible to formula for then against and cause benefit analysis cannot be raised intellectual relevances of the posing of critical historical ethical question rather than offering solutions about policy rather than techno expertise. And
you should say if we win framework the permanent.
If we win,
relevant.
I already said that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Now the next argument you need to do is cred fails. So I would start with this.
Their predictions fail. Multiple complex factors make credit useless in the long term. Fail by sin. Theoretical logic and empirical evidence such that action taken the present one after predictable facts on the credit to the future and the tendency to send messages that are the national identity for the also policy to have the future sense of our control much of will occur between the current credits and the next international environmental change and quite unpredictable target actions are not likely to believe the action is taken the clues of the future action they believe our actions are independent and states don't act based on credibility structural constraints called nation to assume the worst and discount past behavior. Their scholarship ignores the effects of confirmation bias and fundamental attribution. Policymakers try to reconcile data if their previous view of the country see the U.S. as a unilateral hegemon imposing its will in the world. Now the apple seen as a half-hearted attempt to justify world leasing rather than the genuine international concession. Fundamental attributed error takes out the advantage of voice centers that there is scanned evidence the target states ever learned the right lesson. The serious scholar as their studies have further to cast further down on the independence across foreign policy action interpreted the action, the right of the situation dependent upon the constraints of place and time. Therefore, they're not likely to form lasting impression for single independent events and credibility in the eye of the beholder. The message of the Athens are received incorrectly, felt by same credibility beyond the control of the United States. Neither people nor the states are on their reputations. They cannot exert complete control over their reputation after series analyses form their own perception affected by their needs and goals. Others will not receive messaging in the way they were intended. Sending message for consideration, future grants is all but they can play bargaining and behavior reputation ensures implementation fails to tangify politicians and have the nuance understanding credibility finds that the behavior reputation improve their bargaining reputation, confuse themselves, mislead their domestic audience, squander their country blood and trade for the wrong commodity, misread and politicians neither lump their two beliefs together, believe the behavior reputation get immediately converted. This informs one central belief behind the code of reputation. They
No, the next thing is the alt.
And the alternative is that stop believing incredibly foreign policy should be based on rational assessment of material costs and benefits of proposed action, not the prediction of how will affect the state's credibility that would limit unnecessarily intervention which sought their unilateral militarism arguments critique as an inherent pedagogical value. Academics do not share policy discourse calling into question certain forms of knowledge improves policy making facilitate progressive social change in June 99 and the central political task in intellectuals under prevailing discourse through education the hegemony is an through educational activity hegemony is a pedagogical relation in history furnishes example of progress or development positively influenced by organic intellectual operating outside party structure, the argument security discipline, defensive intellectuals had an effective one short-term policy to shift the paradigm.
Yeah, parameters.
We have
837.
position, and then the critique. And on the K, it's going to be like the 1NR like framework stuff, and then everything else.
So start at the bottom. And
Yeah.
So cred, condo, critique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not just like condo and like framework, like all of the 1NR, and then.
Okay. Yeah. I just heard the word condition.
Yeah. Do you both have it?
It's loading. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Got it.
Okay, is everyone ready? Cool. You know what I'm telling you, unsustainable means a child die out. The all does nothing to change the fact that acting of the future is currently an easy to the country efficacy case of these only whether we can try to adjust the integrate China into the international order. The all does nothing to adjust that things like hardline stances or real stances that the alternatives in this case will just alienate them further, causing Asia war now. Yes, no all causes given might be important. However, it's a question of the symbol of anti-racism in Latin America. The present because of Cuba is the root cause of the leftist government hating the U.S. Obama might be, now that is not a relevant question. Whether he have leadership within multilateral institutions, Latin America, box able to solve that, gives him the ability to have those initiatives without strong arguments and without any backlash. The Wolford argument, it will be answered on the other floor. There is attachment to the argument, uniquely classing enemies of legitimacy is more crucial now than every time before. Dickerson is affirmative because it's indicates it's both necessary and sufficient. It indicates that U.S. will look like a credible negotiating partner with the Red North Korea because we actually will respond when they back down from their hardline stance. That's also answers the Hinderal argument. Yes, we saw power diffusion. That was a Latin American argument to that we regional voting blocks was consciously powerful in the U.S. The drug war CIR might be important. However, the absence of prerequisites, so that was the pairs evidence extended about there is no. Yes, there's an independent power position. You should prefer evidence specific to corruption in Asia in the current scenario rather than just a generic pontificating about things like hegemony in the past transition. We're not going for the house, but in fact, we say that Wolf causing some withdrawal. However, the deterrence of some arguments like Wolford don't take out the affirmative because he said, yes, status competition is inevitable, but it's a question of how you achieve that status. It's better have China and achieve that status by integrating them into the international institutions than have them achieve that status with things like military competition, which is what the entirety of the internal link is. Now, yes, terrorism impacts is not a question of U.S. troops going to Cuba or like Gural advocates. We don't, first, Gural never makes a claim that we withdraw troops from the rest of the world and send them to Cuba. It just makes a claim that U.S. Cuba will become an unstable place for us, a breeding ground for Caribbean terrorism. Well, 1% risk of terrorism is sufficient to outweigh that. You can see the terminal impact needs to get ACE in case that causes a miscalculation nuclear war with Russia and China. Okay. On the Kiddush debate, I'm not going for explicitly concede best policy option. That means that in this debate you should probably vote for the permutation because that is the best policy option. There's no differentiate between the alternative and the permutation in the word of policy, which means that any risk of net benefit of things like terrorism is sufficient for affirmative. Now the affirmative debate, the most about that we get to win after Sasko or the process the judge is just a judge of policy debate, not a critical intellectual. The plan doesn't ever happen. Obviously, it's a question of clash in the way that we debate and our weighing the prerequisites to that because we even as reason it's the basis of all competition and our advocacy is the plaintiffs which they co-op, and then that's a prerequisite in any of the education arguments because clash is the only way we can test those education. It's not a question of ground, but a question of in-round equity. Now there is also no impact to the fact that things like pedagogy matter. Yes, you can still read the critique, you just have to win that the impacts and credibility being bad outweigh the rest of the impacts of the affirmative and outweigh the benefits of the plan being done. There are infinite potential justifications. That's an argument because it's impossible for them to be able to pick out of any single one of them, which makes it an impossible burden for fully placed to steal the affirmative. Now they could just literally pick out of one thing like carrot talk graphs or failed states, we can never generate office of the rest of the affirmative. There's also no zero policy value, just in case that we should not presume policy making is more important than everything else. But yeah, yes, but you have to win that other things are more important. Now, restoration reality, I wanted to see evidence indicates that there is no material effect of the way that we discuss things in the real world. It's a question of whether how other countries negotiate with the U.S. which means that we actually the only internal link to the credibility. Now there is no, now the overview that the fluency is largely irrelevant. There is no impact to things like there's no impact to things like interventions or things like multilateralism because we are able to share our costs with us. The company advocates that the multilateralism became able to retrench ourselves into natural system and negotiate, which means that the only terminal impact of this is a small intervening wars argument. There's no global escalation claim and no nuclear war argument, which means that you should default affirmative in any case. There's also no threat inflation because our polar evidence case of multilateralism actually deflates threats because it allows countries to negotiate better. The framing issues that all the evidence about things like Cold War deterrence and maintaining a strong posture in the face of not appeasing people, they have is fundamentally different and just not based off of things like military credibility, based off the way that other countries perceive us as a negotiating partner, which solves all of their negotiation arguments. Doesn't lead to overstretch. That was the Latin American voting box arguments. Perfcon should lower the threshold we have for voting on the permutation because they have severed their reputations and their pedagogy on the other floor. There's no reason why the app should be held through every single instance of every single one they see card. There's also no reason why the permutation cannot occur because they have considered the bottom three states question, just the pedagogy, including the questioning credibility that our plan and the alternative can obviously simultaneously exist. We can do the plan, but also simultaneously question pedagogy. Now, there's also credibility theory is also true. Best research concludes credibility critical and influences international action, works to the essence of opponents' interests, effects will translate to effective trend. Second is rejected methodology. This studies rests solely on absolute crisis moments in specific instances and misses the action states have taken to past action when a credible security key was in place. That's a wide degree. It's also a question of state perception. Countries learn from the behavior of other states, even if credibility isn't. Alliance formation studies prove credibly matters. Global A state published from the arm of alliance can be offered many measures simply capable of repetition using a simple research repetition of important consequences for state behavior. Anything?
Okay, 840.
820.
Sorry, I forgot about the one. critique, transition, cred. Okay, everyone good? Is that yes?
Yeah.
Great.
The belief of legitimacy causes escalation of crises. They've considered the tendency impact calculus, which causes horizontal escalation because we get drawn into conflicts that we otherwise wouldn't, because we do this on behalf of our allies. Also causes vertical escalation because we view reputation as a sunk cost, and whenever we start a conflict, we are less likely to settle it because we think reputation is all the line. Even if you think there are evidences about deterrence, which is the only part of the linear that even comes close to impact defense, the affirmative's framing of rising powers as a threat to multilateralism and the desire to forcibly integrate them justifies integration to protect them by lashing out against rising powers. Even if you think that there is a possible reading of the 1AC that is totally peaceful, the way that they have framed their arguments, the way that we have contextualized our critique in the context of the 1AC should defeat any of their interlinked defense, you should vote negative to refuse to play the bankrupt game of stats competition. The alternative still is the vast majority of the case, so any of us but link arguments, there's sufficient reason to vote negative. The affirmative, or rather the alternative, restrains our interventionist foreign policy because we don't intervene on behalf of our allies or to preserve credibility. They've conceded that there are intrinsic material benefits to multilateralism and liberalism, which means one, the liberal order is inevitable because states act based on material interests. Two, the alternative can include engagement in multilateral institutions, which lends them the necessary credibility. Two is credibility turns power projection advantage. They've conceded the walls evidence that allies have an incentive to make the United States worried about legitimacy, so we do more for them, but ultimately that is a lie because our material benefits cooperate with the United States. That only results in overstretch, which is their Cuba focus interlink, makes us less capable of fighting against terrorism. Now, the framework debate first, I'll answer the conditionality argument. We also made the argument that it's useful to test the affirmative from multiple angles and that they should have to defend their ideology because Obama had to defend healthcare from both the right and the left. They've conceded scholarship matters on the framework debate, so the debate's obviously not just about policy. Framework debate proper. Yes, you are obviously judging a debate, but you can also set a curriculum with your ballot. They've conceded that critical engagement is substantively important. The Jones evidence, which is the alternative solvency card that Dylan read, says that critique spills over to shape social and policy currents, which means that they crowd out the only avenue for actual change because the plan does not actually happen. Now, here is the 2-hour ballot. It's going to be permutation plus transition advantage outweighs. The permutation depends on plain focus. Obviously, if there's a link to the affirmative, if they have to be held responsible for their representations, then the alternative is skepticism of credibility. The affirmative is faith and credibility. That is logically incoherent. You can automatically vote neg. They can weigh the affirmative, but the permutation alternative solvency are irrelevant because it's a question of which foreign policy roadmap is better. They've conceded the Kirky evidence that empirical investigation is useless unless it's situated within a broader conceptual matrix, which is the purpose of our criticism. This means the affirmative gets the offense, i.e. they can weigh the case / we are not going for the floating pick arguments. However, it's important to lend context to their scholarships that you should still evaluate the 1AC's justifications. They've conceded the affirmative gets offense because they chose the 1AC, which answers all their clash and ground standards. Plain focus is worse because it justifies picks and process counterpoints. They see reps don't shape reality. We've disproven that with the terminal impact debate. Their card is hyper-generic and says that representations are not the only justification, but in the context of credibility it results in actimania and threat inflation because we view everything as a threat to credibility. The fact that they couldn't even define what credibility was proves that everything becomes a threat to it because it just doesn't exist. Impact debate. Or the 1-year proper. Their framing, they say that they don't lead to intervention because multilateral checks, that their framing of multilateralism is a function of legitimacy triggers our impacts. Their argument is about multilateralism in the abstract, which means this is the net benefit to the alternative. Even if they have linked defense, they see no global escalation. Our conflict escalates in nuclear, where the impact calculus is done above and overrides deterrence or Wolforth evidence points to status competition, which is a realist thesis, overrides multilateralism because countries won't just accept the United States as the leader, which interlinks result of their voting blocks argument. Even if everyone in Latin America votes with us, the rest of the world will not, especially other rising powers, which they say need to be integrated in the multilateral order. But why would they agree to be integrated into an order which the United States leads? They say no threat inflation, yes threat inflation, because they can't even define credibility, so everything is a threat to it. They say no link to overstress, that's instead of permutation debate. They say perf-con argument was an even if statement. We had the blanket statement the credibility was not true. Even if it was, the affirmative had their ideas about credibility wrong. They should not be able to sever their representations because the 1AC was the foundational artifact of the debate. If the affirmative scholarship matters, this is obviously incoherent, which I explained on the framework debate. It's not just a question of pedagogy, it's a question of belief or skepticism in credibility. Our pedagogy is mutually exclusive of the way that they've presented the 1AC. They say cred theory is true. They're way behind on this part of the debate. Their internal link to multilateralism is credibility theory, so if we defeat the thesis of cred, then we also defeat the multilateral advantage. One is attribution error. Allies will always love us, enemies will always hate us because allies think that we're good people and enemies think that we're imperialist demons, which means the affirmative can't change opinions. Two, the wrong message is sent because historically the United States has manipulated and used other countries to spread its values and expand imperialism, which proves that this only creates rising expectations. We think that we are perceived as benign after the confirmed based on the representations, but other countries don't think that. So when they don't reciprocate concessions, the entire order falls apart. They see a lines formation that's answered by the wall type in this transition page. No impact of terrorism. They can't build a bomb. There's no expertise. There's no supply. They can't deploy it. They have to do it in Cuba in like 6 months because we sent our troops there before the United States stabilized. Zero risk of disadvantage because they didn't answer any of those arguments. Credit page. They conceded multilateral fails because nationalism co-opted. No new arguments in the two-era. They can't access this advantage even if unilateral is bad. There's no alternative to it. Voting blocks don't sell blood broad approval. The F won't bind us into multilateral institutions. Their card says we're necessary but not sufficient. There's no political will. Our strategy right now is unilateral power bargaining solves transition where status competition corrupts. So troops critique turns the impacts of the case.
We have 2:15.
We're not going for the transition advantage. We'll concede there's no impact to terrorism, which takes out any chance of offense here, and I go on to multilateral. Unilateralism is unsustainable status quo. They have not contested fact, which means that try-die for the friend armed pact is both inevitable and terminal against the Asian transition or leads to exchange, which means that we access the only existential sun planet, even if there are more interventions in the world from that does not lead to transition, which was the only war that draws in major powers like Russia and China leads to nuclear extinction, prefer magnitude, because the only that you can only die once which takes out prevents the chance for any human civilization beyond that. Now, unilateral is unsustainable because the economic cooperation, economic intervention is also small states are backlashing against the US. All these are reasons why we can no longer sustain the unipolar system. Only alternative is to transition away from a multipolar system. Now, even if we do not win the 100% multipolar systems, all their impact doesn't matter because we win it is now better than unilateral system doesn't continue in the status quo. Also, reason why their realist perception cannot solve any of the case. Now, second, they say nationalism. However, we answer this in the open one area when we said voting blocks solve this impact because a lot of corporations and we all corporations and also other countries like in Latin America interest converge, which means we have a majority in these international institutions. Even if we do not win, that we have everyone these national things we solve for nationalism because their internal links, the national parts is predicated demonstrated of how their interest disparities. We solve these things, and yes, the impacts of building blocks. That was about that. The K can't turn the case either because they do not access the impact. I'll get to that on the K proper. Now, go on to the criticism. First, I will highlight 2 arguments that should frame your decision. First, they do not answer the framing issue of the 1A argument. There are 2 distinct types. They do not spend sufficiently amount of time on the 1A arguments. There are 2 distinct types of legitimacy and credibility. First is the institutional legitimacy, which is the absolute legitimacy. This includes framing the U.S. as a benign power international institution and thinking that other countries and allowing other countries to think that we will fulfill our promise and be a benign country in negotiations. Second form of legitimacy is the type of legitimacy they critique, which is the form of legitimacy that is military and deterrence legitimacy. Now, they do not access the internal links that impact from our form of legitimacy, only their form of legitimacy. All their evidence is written in the context of how deterrence and legitimacy makes us more likely to intervene because we are trying to prevent and trying to prove that we're credible. In fact, all their evidence indicates that it is written in the context of the Cold War in Vietnam, where we didn't need to intervene in other countries to prove that we had military strength and we could support our allies. Also, even their 10 years indicates, I'll quote from the card, says, a state can usually convince others of its willingness to defend its vital interests by frequently fighting for interests others believe it feels are less than vital. We do not lead to reintervention because we allow for other states to get coerced into, we allow other states to become drawn into the international system. This solves all the reason why legitimacy is bad. Now, second is the credibility is bad. Credibility is true. Our best evidence cites that other countries perceive the U.S. as credible because we allow for them to see perceived as a benign power. U.S. will try to maintain power inevitably. It's just a question of how we maintain it. If we try to maintain credibility by pursuing legitimate policies and integrating others in the global system, that means we will solve the terminal impact. The U.S. the plan allows us to be perceived as a benign power rather than a malevolent one. Also extend all of our cards into the state perception links prove that we have empirical statistical studies that proves to prove that the U.S. is perceived as better. It changes our image within the international community because countries are more likely to integrate with us. Now, even if Cuba is not the only thing that will challenge Chinese power, for example, still allows them to see the U.S. is negotiating in good faith and also trying to increase the status of other countries. Now, even as the realism arguments don't take out any of the firm because even if the realism is true, that doesn't matter because it's just a question of how we integrate these rising powers in the system. If China wants to have more power, yes, it can have more power, but how it needs to be safely integrated in the global system. Also, our Pulio answers all of the impact arguments because there's no risk that any of the countries will want to increase the intervention and have threat construction. Indicates when countries are involved in multi-level solution means they are less likely to frame risk as threat construction because they are invested in the solutions that they create together through multilateral institutions. Now, the alternative does not solve anything. The alternative is just to reject the government. You should not let them feel that all their credibility goes away just how we reframe U.S. policy. The only pragmatic solution right now is the affirmative, which allows us to reframe U.S. policy. The framing debate. This is probably a watch. Doesn't matter really. We get to weigh the case. That's what they said. And so we also means that they do not. The reps don't come through just because we have one bad representation incredibly. Even if our representation incredibly slightly flawed, still doesn't matter because we should win the rest of the case. We need to do impact calculus about why this one instance of incredibly false representation incredibly outweighs the majority thesis of the case, which is still majority is true. Now, if they say reps don't shape reality, reps shape reality. Have this is irrelevant. Even if we grant them the reps shape reality, we will not give them the internal links, the impact which we explained above. Even if our credibility reps are not bad, they do not get the internal links, the impact because the student their evidence does not describe the same kind of credibility their evidence describes. Now, they say multiple times afterwards. Yes, it does. It's not just in the after because our evidence is based on scientific and empirical evidence. Not on the credibility. They say that it's a manipulation that is not true because we allow for other countries to have. We don't demand anything from other countries. We just allow for them to perceive the U.S. as more benevolent. Also, there's no rising expectations either because we do not force them to reciprocate. Our action is not positive action from other countries. It's a negative action by the U.S. by repealing the embargo shows the U.S. is willing to engage on the countries. They describe 2 different forms of credibility in the 2R. One of them is which their internal links, the impact is predicated off of. We access the other one. There is no impact. So even if we win a small risk of case, it still outweighs the
Good debate. Good debate.
I have a couple cards. I want to see what will probably just be easier if I can get all the K cards, I guess.
Yeah.
And then also the 1AC. I just want to see. And the K answers, obviously. congrats to both teams. I thought this was a really great debate. I end up voting for the affirmative. For me, the biggest problem is I think you need to dedicate more time to the link debate. I think there is a good chance. I understand the frustration certainly from the initial cross-ex question about what credibility means, but I think pretty consistently throughout their debate, they're saying that there is this distinction between the type of credibility that your link assumes versus what their app assumes. And the top of the two in our best link articulation is that even if you think our EV is deterrence, the app frames rising powers out of this desire to forcibly integrate, but I don't think that's what the app does. And I think that their explanation of it supports that. They have this argument that rising powers is a thing that is happening now. They are forcing their own integration and want it to happen regardless. So it's just a question of how the US reacts to that. Which for me makes me think that this is not a US desire to forcibly integrate. It's just a question of how the US is responding to other countries integrating themselves as the quick and dirty of it. So for me that severely mitigates any risk of a link to it. I think that if you sit on this question better and can articulate it in a way that sits on it a little bit longer, that makes this distinction that anything other than this idea that the US is trying to forcibly integrate countries, or explain maybe how, talk specifically about how the, let me see what the plain text is real quick. That normalized trade relations is perceived as them forcibly trying to integrate, and spend more time on that kind of articulation, then I think this gives you a stronger risk of a link.
I guess my question for that is like, so the link argument I was trying to make, so there's part of it that's rising powers, and then there's another portion that's just like we view threats to the liberal order as something that we need to wipe out, because we think the liberal order needs to be sufficiently credible, and if credibility is a myth, then we'll always continue to try to do that because there's no threshold for how credible it has to be.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that link argument?
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think for me, any risk that these countries are forcibly integrating themselves proves there is some degree of instability that happens.
Okay.
So it's a question of maybe if you have a, because you get to case with not a lot of time at the bottom. So I think if you go to the cred flow and have a better articulation of why, if these countries are trying to forcibly integrate, then like they will just resolve it themselves and explain more why US cred, or why like who cares what the fuck the US does. It's just a question of what these countries do, and they will be able to just resolve it themselves regardless of how the US reacts to them.
Okay.
And if you tie that sort of case articulation to that second link level, then it makes it appear more like things will be stable in that transition. The US, there's only a risk, and then it switches like there's only a risk that the US intervention messes things up.
That was what I was kind of trying to do, but I can see why that maybe wasn't articulated as well as it needed to be.
Yeah, I think if you get to...
Did you think that the F solved multilat?
Not a great...
Just like at all?
Well, I think there is a risk of some of this instability that could happen, and I think if you don't go to the transition flow maybe as long and get to the cred flow with more time.
That's an impact rather than an internal link.
Yeah. I think that there's a chance that their plan could cause some sort of more stable integration than...
How?
I don't think they have like the strongest risk of these things, but there is a chance that instability is happening now, that even if it's only with certain countries, there's a chance that it, let me see where I have it. So there's any risk of backlash over the system.
But I guess that's the part that I'm a little bit confused about. Is like I definitely understand the defensive critique, and I understand there's a low risk of that. I'm just like sort of trying to figure out how to make the risk of the case lower in the future.
Yeah.
So the way that I understand this, like there's an impact uniqueness argument that there will be instability in the future. The arguments we were trying to go for are like the affirmative doesn't lock us into these institutions. Status competition means that other countries won't lock themselves into these institutions because they want to outcompete the United States. And the third argument was like, cred fails, they don't trust us. So the F isn't a genuine multilateral gesture. So given those three arguments, why do you think the AFSOL is multi-led?
I guess in a world where those are defense, that any risk that the countries do trust them and perceive this is kind of.
But why do you think there's like any risk at all?
Let's see. They have some arguments about the voter bloc sends some sort of signal of coverage that some countries might like. I think you could do a better job certainly explaining the internal link. But for me, there's kind of this try or die momentum happening here as a reason why they might not win a huge risk of their impact, but they do have some impact rating. I don't think it's extinction because you changed this framing in the 2AR, and that's certainly not that in the 1AR, and your entire 1AC doesn't say the word extinction in it. So I do think it is just kind of this global war that's happening. So I wouldn't have given you leads to extinction on my own, but it is this kind of transition war that might take place if some countries do or don't react in certain ways to the U.S.
Then the last question I have, sorry about this.
No, go.
Okay, the last question I have is like, so we made the argument that there are material reasons to engage in liberal structures besides United States credibility, which is like constructivist.
That overstructure.
So then the two impacts that I tried to make to that are like, one, alt can engage in these as well because there's a material justification for doing so. Two, other countries will inevitably do it regardless of how credible the U.S. is. So given those arguments, why do you think there's still a risk of the case?
I just don't see the alt as super competitive anymore.
Okay.
So for me, I think that the case also resolves some of these questions. That they access the same kind of impacts from this material connections and engagements.
Yeah, but the question I was asking is more like, so the two arguments go for current, really.
No.
So given that you're comparing the alt and the plan, if the alt really sort of just captures the benefits of engaging in international institutions without whatever tiny baggage there is to talking about cred, then like why is
For
that
me,
not
I don't really compare the alt to it in a world without the link debate.
Okay.
Is what that kind of comes down to. I think they're also making a little bit of articulation on the. I think if you sit more on how the alt solves the specific internals of the case, because the way I have some of the alt impacts explained are more just in the context of these kind of ambiguous instability conflicts. And I look at like the 1NC cards and the impact cards to try and be like, what is the impact really to this? And it doesn't seem as grand necessarily as the 1AC. So I understand like you're making the this turns case claims, but a little more interconnection between those two as to why the instability of like allied free riding is what the internals are to solving or to access their impacts as well. Yeah.
Okay.
How do you think that the 2AR should have like did the like separated the link debate and like the cred theory? That like did you evaluate the cred theory stuff at all?
You mean down on the framework portion or on the cred page? Like the cred. Okay. I gave it to Ricardo. Sorry, do you just mean like the impact work at the top of the cred page?
No, like the card about like all the arguments about why cred theory is like correct or not. Like.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought your articulation was good on the difference between the two. That there is a different way that the U.S. should situate themselves in a world of rising powers, as opposed to the. Because the one thing I think that like the neg cards talk about is this idea that the U.S. will use credibility wars, and they seem to be like the way the U.S. uses cred is through the plan. So I don't necessarily know why the plan as a form of credibility necessarily means these credibility wars happen. So I think I understood that articulation.
In the 1AR, I was trying to like, I guess you're always told to like pick arguments, like choose a strategy on the K. Do you think I narrowed it down enough, or I should have cut out more of like extraneous stuff so I could like maybe read more cards on like cred theory?
maybe the framework debate was a touch heavy, but it obviously worked in the end because you got to just weigh the case first. Possibly the way you could do this is pick to go more heavy on the framework or the perm debate to get you a little more time somewhere else. Because I don't know if you thought maybe you would end up going for the perm, or if you really just wanted to get the framework so you could weigh the case. But if you didn't see yourself going for the perm, then just spending enough time on the framework debate to like when you get to weigh the app would free up some of the perm time to give you space elsewhere. But yeah, because that is obviously where you were pretty heavy for most of it, so I think that's fine. But really good debate. I enjoyed judging it.
Thanks.
Thanks. We can stay here because we were.
I know, but I'm in charge of this.
It's fun. Sorry. We're gonna hit social media. So.
We have to return the stand to Bishop, right?
Thanks.
Argue.